So, imagine that this morning a single piece of footage appears on the news. Not staged a real video, recorded on a regular phone. Somewhere on the outskirts of a city, something enormous is standing there. 8 metal limbs. A body the size of a 5-story building. Red lights somewhere on its head. It isn't moving, it's just standing there, looking around. By noon, there are already thousands of these videos, from different angles, from different cities. All of them are going viral on TikTok and Instagram, but no one can explain what it is. And then, the people standing nearby suddenly start running. It moved. By that time, the army has already surrounded it and is simply observing for now, while the government stays silent and pushes away all reporters and press. Yes, this is the Omnidroid V10, without Syndrome, without a remote control, an autonomous machine built to kill. And today we're going to break down what would happen if Syndrome's genius creation ended up in the hands of humanity. What goals would it have? And could humanity actually defeat it? In the film, the Omnidroid had a program. Syndrome gave it tasks: find a super, attack, eliminate. The machine operated strictly within that program. In our world, there are no supers. And this is the first and most important thing to understand. Its behavior during the first hours would be completely unpredictable because its target function has no valid objects to apply to. It's possible the Omnidroid wouldn't make the first move because it is designed to fight only a real threat, one it identifies and selects itself. Meanwhile, the army is trying to clear the area of all civilians and evacuate them as far away as possible. The Omnidroid has already been classified as a foreign object, and information about its existence is likely being suppressed, but time is passing. They need information about this object and need to understand how to respond. One general decides they should fire at its hull and observe the reaction, and this is where things start to get interesting. Because the V10 was trained to respond to attacks, a single rifle shot means nothing to it physically, but its systems record the direction, the type of threat, and the distance. The Omnidroid didn't move from its position because the threat level from ordinary bullets was too low. The army, realizing that its armor was extremely durable, decided not to take any radical action on the first day. But there was one thing they didn't understand. The Omnidroid is still a living mechanism of sorts, and its lack of action does not mean it's just a piece of metal. On the second day, a decision is made to move it farther away from the city. The army plans to use trucks and heavy cables to drag it out. But the Omnidroid understands that they are trying to restrict its movement, and it begins to interpret these actions as a threat. It suddenly stands up and starts moving, crushing the vehicles beneath its massive legs. Everyone is in shock. People realize that this machine isn't just a piece of metal, it has some form of intelligence. Panic breaks out. Soldiers, terrified, begin firing at its body, forgetting that bullets have no effect on it. The Omnidroid perceives this as a single large threat. Instead of searching for specific targets, it starts rolling across the ground like a giant metal sphere, crushing and killing everyone in its path. The general quickly realizes that fighting it right now is pointless. They completely misjudge the threat level of this machine. Day 3 arrives. The decision is finally made to fight the robot and attempt to break through its armor. Armored vehicles go in first, which makes perfect sense. A modern tank carries dozens of tons of armor and a cannon capable of punching through a meter of solid steel. Against the 510, it actually works. Several limbs are damaged, and the main body takes visible dents. Victory? Not even close. The machine records everything. The trajectories of the shells, the speed of the armored vehicles, and the exact distance at which they open fire. When the tanks attack again, they face a completely different pattern of movement. The Omnidroid no longer stands still. It moves in a way that causes the shells to pass through the gaps between its limbs. Air power brings different results and a different problem. Precision strikes from above begin to cause real damage. Thermobaric munitions create pressure strong enough to deform metal even without a direct hit. 2 of the limbs are destroyed, but what happens next is the important part. The V10 simply redistributes the load across the remaining 6 limbs and keeps moving. Its entire design was built to operate under damage. Syndrome engineered it to remain combat capable even after suffering serious losses. Eventually, the military decides to try something else, an electromagnetic pulse. From the sensor data they collected, it becomes clear that the machine operates completely autonomously, and that some internal program is responsible for its decision-making. The EMP is deployed, but the Omnidroid is still standing. Instead of shutting down, it redirects the electrical surge throughout its entire body, preventing its systems from collapsing from within. A week passes. The government still doesn't understand what to do with it, but one thing is clear. Every existing method of attack helicopters, aircraft, tanks, soldiers with weapons, is now automatically perceived as a threat, and it triggers the Omnidroid to fight even more aggressively. So, the only option left is to leave it alone and continue observing its behavior. Then a question appears that changes the entire strategy. What if they simply stop attacking? If all military actions stop, the machine stops receiving new data to learn from. It remains frozen at the level of adaptation it has already reached. It's not a victory, but it stops the situation from getting worse. This is exactly the conclusion they arrive at after 2 weeks. Not because it's a good strategy, but because continuing the attacks becomes literally counterproductive. And that's when the conversation shifts in a completely different direction. If it can't be destroyed by force, it has to be stopped another way. And the only method that worked in the film was controlling its system directly through a remote controller that, in this situation, we simply don't have. The solution comes from a group of engineers and cybersecurity specialists. For several weeks, they analyze the machine's movement patterns and eventually discover something unusual. The V10 periodically sends out short radio signals. Not for communication, for self-diagnostics. It's an internal system check protocol that's Syndrome built into the base architecture back in the early versions. This signal becomes the entry point. Not a hack in the traditional sense, more like listening in on the frequency where the machine talks to itself. After 3 weeks of working with the signal, they don't manage to take control, but they do manage to create a brief self-diagnostic loop that freezes all of the movement systems. 7 seconds is enough to deliver a directed thermite charge to the body, burning through the central processor core. And the moment the 510 stops moving, a different war begins. Quiet, diplomatic, and in some ways more dangerous than everything that came before. The country where this happened immediately declares the machines remain state property and seals off the entire area. Within 24 hours, delegations begin arriving at its borders with offers for joint research. It's polite language for a much simpler question. Who will gain access first to a technology that just survived days of continuous military attacks and remained standing? Disassembling the V10 takes years literally, because its materials and architecture don't match anything in existing engineering databases. Every component becomes a separate discovery. Armor alloys that deform under impact and then restore their shape. Hydraulic systems that redistribute load faster than anyone thought possible. And a learning neural network architecture embedded directly into the hardware itself, not just software. Let's move 20 years into the future. By this point, the technology behind the V10 has been partially replicated, not completely, because some components of the original still defy explanation, but enough to build machines that operate on the same principles. Several countries now have their own versions. They call them different things: autonomous combat platforms, adaptive defense systems, but the core idea is the same. The arms race triggered by the appearance of a single machine begins to develop along the same logic as the nuclear arms race of the mid-20th century. The difference is that nuclear weapons eventually developed clear limitations on their use over decades of political agreements and deterrence doctrine. Adaptive combat robots don't have those limits yet. International law simply hasn't had time to create them. It's a space where the rules haven't been written, and every country is writing its own.